This is the Art of Darkness podcast with Kevin Kautzman.
And Brad Kelly. We're a couple of very online writers interested in the dark side of what drives creative people to create against all odds.
This show is about art and the people who make it, what it costs them, and what it takes to bring something unique and impactful into the world.
Each episode, we excavate the life and work of an artist you might think you know.
Don't worry, they're all safely dead.
On every episode, we try and find out just what the hell was wrong with them and how they worked through their darkness to create something that lives on after them and continues to move culture.
Find us online at artofdarkpod.com and on Twitter at Kevin Kautzman and at Brad Kelly. All right, we're back with another rockin' episode of the podcast about the dark side of creatives, Art of Darkness. I'm Kevin Kautzman, and I'm joined by the singular Brad Kelly. How are you, Brad?
I'm doing pretty good, man. How are you?
Brad, love will tear us apart again. Love will tear us apart again. Yeah, indeed. Oh boy, I have been immersed this past week in the work of English playwright Sarah Kane. She is our subject today. And, well, again, this is a podcast about the dark side of creatives. We're not going to have any trouble finding that here.
Okay, this is a gimme.
This is a layup. All due respect, this is very recent memory. She's a major playwright.
Yeah.
I would count her as an influence myself. I feel a certain radiation from her and her legacy. I have slight personal connections. The Royal Court was really formative in my own life as a playwright. I'm very familiar with the theater upstairs, where her first play debuted and changed the English stage forever. And where she would take her life is, in fact, where it was the very reason I was over in England for that year. My first wife was getting her master's degree at the very teaching hospital where Sarah would enter life. So there was this specter. But this isn't about me. This is about Sarah Kane and her work. And I want to preface this by saying this is not Oscar Wilde. This is not somebody a little further back in time. This is somebody who's pretty near to us and still has living relations and all the rest of it. So I am endeavoring to do this out of a spirit of real curiosity, and I certainly am hoping that I get it right.
Right.
This episode is going to focus principally on the work, and well, I guess let's start with the typical Art of Darkness question. Brad, what do you know about Sarah Kane?
I don't know a whole lot other than, I do on the Twitter, I will a couple times a week, I will do like a one tweet episode and just a few pictures of an artist and a description. So I had stumbled across her and sort of read her Wikipedia and kind of realized, and not being all that close to the theater, I hadn't ever heard of her, honestly, and was sort of realized I'd uncovered something a little bit seismic in the theater world that I hadn't been aware of.
You're not pronouncing it properly. It's the theater.
The theater.
No, see, that's the whole. No, it's not the theater.
No, it's not.
No, you're right. And Sarah Kane, there's nobody bigger in contemporary theater from, I guess, the post-war. Really, the only thing that might have curtailed her impact was the brevity of her life. But despite this, she has had this incredibly outsized influence on the theater, and that's what we're going to dig into. It's also sort of, again, my spiritual home in terms of theater is in this new writing milieu in the UK, to be frank, and its effect. And so this is a very personal episode for me, and hopefully I can do it justice. Well, if I had to again press the question, what do you know about her?
I just know that she was an English playwright. She has her plays had a bit of a reputation for sort of like violence, is my understanding.
Oh,
Like you would have
oh
like
yes. Oh,
yeah,
indeed.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Now you mentioned the Twitter account, which
yeah,
is at Art of Dark Pod,
that's
and
right.
we do a Patreon as well. That's at patreon.com/Art of Dark Pod. Each episode like this gets a bonus episode for the Patreon subscribers, which includes an extra dark story. And the story or the theme that we're going to do on today's Patreon episode, after the main episode here, is going to have to do with violence and her
Okay.
her opinion of violence. In terms of representation in the stage. Oh yes,
Yeah.
very violent, ultra violent,
Right.
cannibalism,
Wow.
incest,
Yeah.
mutilation, torture, body horror. I don't.
Right.
This will not be a family-friendly episode of Art of
Okay.
Darkness. However, I am going to begin because I was doing a search recently, in preparation for the show. I'm going to begin with what I thought and what I like to think maybe she would think is funny. Something
Mhm.
I found. Before I do, I want to say the reason I started with the love will tear us apart. She really liked Joy Division.
Oh,
Yeah,
that seems right to me. Yeah.
she is a quintessential Gen Xer.
Okay.
We'll see because she was born in the 70s. I think if you frame it that way, if you think about her now, she would have resented sort of being, and she did actively resent being compared to Tarantino. But
Hmm.
if you kind of are placing her in time as an American, you
Mhm.
can kind of place her into that mid 90s vibe. Because that's when her career really kicked off. But the thing that I think is funny is that I went looking for Sarah Kane online, and I found this Kids Search Encyclopedia.
Oh,
Kate,
always a good source. Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah. This is we're very serious historians on Art of Darkness. Kids Search with a Z, Kids, and here's the entire Kids Search entry for Sarah Kane. She was born on the 3rd of February of 1971 and died on the 20th of February in 1999. She only lived to be 28. She just got to be 28 years old.
Whoa.
Yeah. She was an English playwright. Her writings, again, this is kidsearch.com. Her writings dealt with the themes of desire, pain, love, torture, and death. Now, that's very true. If there was an theme that kind of comes out in her work, it is in a sense, the impossibility of love or the possibility of love under the most extreme and stressful circumstances, and the cruelty of man to man, of humanity to itself, and how we don't dare to confront it. But getting back to Kid Search, Pain, Love, Torture, and Death, her 5 plays are Blasted, Phaedra's Love, Cleansed, Crave, and 448 Psychosis. So a career spanning from 1995 with Blasted upstairs at the Royal Court Theater to 448 Psychosis in the year 2000, which was staged after her death.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In 1995, she wrote a screenplay, which you can find this movie, and it's actually Spud from Trainspotting plays the protagonist. I guess you call him the protagonist. It's a short movie called Skin. You can find it on YouTube. It's like a short BBC film. That's about, we'll come to it. She wrote a couple of newspaper articles for The Guardian as well. So going on with Kid Search here. Kane was born in Brentwood, Essex. She was raised by evangelical parents. A Christian in her early life, Kane later became an atheist. She was a lesbian. Kane was depressed for years during her life. On the 20th of February, 1999, she killed herself at King's College Hospital in Camberwell, London, by hanging herself with her shoelaces. She was 28. She had earlier been taken to the same hospital after overdosing on prescription drugs on the 17th of February.
Whoa.
Kids Search.
Kids Search. Jeez.
Oh boy. Well, yeah. So this is I think, how do you say this on Art of Darkness? We're going for big air on this episode.
I guess so. Yeah.
We're
go
going
big or go home.
Go big or go home. So we're really going to get into it here. I'm gonna close my window. I realized I left my window open. I'm a perfectionist here. So vamp, Brad, for 1 second.
Yeah. So 28 years. I mean, you got to think about 28 years old and having written any one piece of work that is respectable at all is impressive. To leave a legacy at 28, there's a lot of, I guess, musicians who accomplished that, but it's pretty rare for a writer to have done really anything at 28, I would say.
Absolutely. And I think I can ramp off that and say her work is very informed by literature, T.S. Eliot, poetry. She was recognized as a poet by the time she had taken her own life, like a poet of the stage. I think Pinter referred to her that way, the soul of a poet. And one thing that we're going to see as we go through these works, and this is going to be the structure of this episode, we're going to go from each of the major, all her plays were major. We're going to go through each of the plays, and you can sort of see as you go along until you arrive at 448 Psychosis, her work, I don't want to say disintegrates, but she progressively interrogated the form of the theater so that, and she never really wrote what you would call a well-made play, right? Hero confronts a challenge. Hero is changed by the challenge. Hero dies tragically or doesn't, and there's a wedding and the play ends and everyone goes home. Right. That was not her modus operandi. Sure. So yeah, let's really, sort of start at the beginning here. So she was born, like I said, in 1971. Let's put her in, place and time. She was born in Brentwood, Essex. It's in the east of England. It is within the London commuter belt. So it's sort of 20 miles east-northeast of Charing Cross. So it's London adjacent. Right. Okay. It's in the London vortex. And she was a London playwright for sure. Raised by evangelical parents. I believe both of her parents were journalists, and this would come into play in terms of her first play, Blasted, which the I don't want to say protagonist. One of the three characters is a tabloid journalist in the first play, Blasted. And so, 1971, she went to Shenfield High School, studied drama at Bristol University, graduating in 92, and then went on to take an MA, a master's course in playwriting at the University of Birmingham, which a playwright by the name of David Edgar led. He led that program, and he's a no slouch himself. Oh,
he's probably still around.
I believe he is. Yeah. Age 73. Yeah, he has his own very sturdy Wikipedia profile here. The whole playwriting world over there is a completely different animal. It's pretty muscular. I'm sure to say that. They don't. Yeah, they don't fool around. So let's see here. She attributed Jeremy Weller's Mad as the one piece of theater that changed her life. So I want to devote a little time to that play as we're sort of getting into her formative time. So
I can feel it even in her titles.
Mm-hmm, right. Mad. Yeah. So I'm looking at this now, there's an article in The Independent here. When you look up this play, and it's culture, theater, mad, bad, and dangerous to know. Siobhan Dolan talks to Jeremy Weller about his new play, Mad, in which women who have suffered from mental illness recreate scenes from their past.
Whoa, okay. Wait, so the actual actresses are recreating from their past, or
well,
within the frame of the story?
I assume that's within the frame of the story.
Okay.
Although, I mean, you wouldn't have a hard time casting that, I don't think. So I'm just quoting this article. In Mad, 8 women who have suffered. So we're trying to get into Sarah Kane's formative experience here, right? She cited Beckett as an influence, who in modern playwriting is an influence by Beckett. She acted in at least one Chekhov play. She was a person of the theater. There's just no question. That's something that I have to stress. Clearly, I mean, she studied drama. She went on to focus on it. So. But in this play, Mad, 8 women who have suffered from some sort of mental illness, including depression and the effects of child abuse and anorexia, recreate scenes from their past in the context of an audition. So they call this controversial harrowing. So she was clearly
super meta.
Yeah, meta and difficult. And this is the kind of theater. This is the milieu that Sarah Kane emerges from, and goes on to sort of become one of the shining lights of what they call the in-your-face theater, is what it's called. In your face, right? Where the audience is not here to look at pretty people and to be distracted for an hour and a half. The audience is here to be challenged and to be thrown through an experience that is unexpected and visceral.
This isn't like date night. This isn't date night. We're going to go see
right, we're going to go see Cleansed for a date night. No, this is genuinely challenging theater. If I were to compare it to maybe to like a painter, you would maybe say we're thinking of like Francis Bacon. Right. These are challenging, and yet I don't want to overstate that end of things, because these plays are also there's a humor. There's a lot of dark humor, and these plays are highly dramatic, very loaded, and as they progress, they have a quality of mystery and openness to them, so that a German company could produce them, and it's almost like an entirely different production. And she was very famous in Germany, to the point where I think they darkened the theaters and had a minute of silence for her in Germany. So she was wildly popular in her own lifetime, to a degree that certainly this playwright has never experienced. She really broke through. But we'll get to it. So this play Mad really influenced her, so she's a student. She's really in the theater, and I'm going to be relying on a text here from Graham Saunders. They always used to give me a hard time at how I'd pronounce Craig. They'd go Craig. Yeah. I'm like, no, Craig. They always gave me a hard time. Craig. Yeah. So
you get a very American accent. So being over there.
Sure. Exactly. Yeah. The accent, and then also for Americans tend to think in terms of film before theater, and that was also very obvious to me. But I have this book, and it's called Kane, and it's in her own words. So it's an awful lot of her that we're going to hear from, which I think is ideal. This is a young lesbian woman in England from an evangelical Christian background. So. I think it's when possible, I think it's best to sort of get it into her own words. So this is her on the Masters in Playwriting program at Birmingham. I started by being an actor, which, by the way, is a pretty good way to start. If you want to write plays, act first. I went to Bristol University and studied. Sense, yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. If you want to compose, you probably need to know how to play the piano. I went to Bristol University and studied drama. After a few productions, I decided I did not like acting very much, so I became a director. Then, as a director, I needed plays and decided to write my own. I do not remember why I did it, but I decided to apply for an MA in playwriting in Birmingham. That's so funny. Why? I don't know why I did it, but here I am. I got funding, and that was the only reason I went, really, because I needed the money. I didn't actually finish the course. When I was there, I wrote the first half of Blasted, and then I moved to London. The course itself was very academic. I did not think that was very useful. I did not go to most of the lectures because I felt that they were inhibiting my writing. Living in Birmingham for a year helped me more as an artist by just making me feel miserable. I was living in a city that I simply hated. The only thing it really gave me was that I decided I wanted to write plays set in a very large industrial city, which was extremely unpleasant. That is what I did, and it became Blasted. In some respects, Birmingham helped me, but at the same time, you could say that it simply where I was in my life. That is simply where I was in my life. So she's in Birmingham. She hates it. She's miserable. She has written a few monologues, which are they're considered juvenilia, right? Very early monologues. Mm-hmm. One of them deals explicitly with sort of lesbian themes, but she's written the first act of Blasted, which was the play that would receive the extreme reaction that she would receive. Now there's her agent, her agent's name escapes me right now, but her agent went to this showcase where, they did the first half of Blasted, or the first act of Blasted. And apparently Sarah, after this, and we're talking about a very young woman here, was quite...
Yes. So how old would she be? Is she 22?
Early 20s, 21, 22. Yeah.
Okay.
I think Blasted, she wrote it when she was 23, so around that time. Apparently Sarah was a little difficult after it was read, or presented rather. But then the next day she had calmed down. So the agent said, okay, maybe I can deal with this writer. And so they opened the doors to get her, to come to London.
Wow.
Yeah. So we have this, and it's hard to overstate how great a play Blasted is. Are you familiar at all with it?
No, I think I was looking for some video and to upload on the Twitter, and I saw like a minute, and then I was like, I don't even want to spoil this for myself, being unfamiliar. I just want to go in totally unfamiliar. So I don't know anything about it.
Oh, it's tremendous. And as a piece of writing as well, you can buy all of these scripts, but because she's so widely studied, they're also very easy to find as PDFs. It's a fun read. It really puts you into her writing is so strong and so spare. There's not a word wasted. There's nothing like seeing a production,
right?
But worth reading. So here is the origins of Blasted. So here's what they're saying. This is not her. This is the book. Kane's accounts of the day she started writing Blasted vary in terms of dates, although the impetus of the siege of Srebrenica remains constant. This culminated in one of the most well-documented atrocities of the conflict, where over the summer of 1995, Serbian forces massacred an estimated 7,000 Muslim men. So there's the backdrop of that conflict behind this play, and that's partly the origin of the play. So quoting Sarah, the day I started writing Blasted was in 1992 when Srebrenica was under siege. And I was getting more and more depressed, having been reading about what was happening in Bosnia during the previous 2 years, and then seeing all this footage on television. And there was a woman who looked directly at the camera, who looked about 70 years old, and her face was lined in gray. She was just crying her eyes out, and she just looked at the camera and said, please, please help us. We don't know what to do. Please help us. And I just sat there crying, watching it. And it wasn't even so much a sense of helplessness as just seeing such extreme pain. And I don't think it was conscious, but I think I started to want to write about that pain. That was probably when I had the idea that I wanted a soldier in it. Yeah. And then
so like a lot of artists, just sensitive.
Yes.
Like a bit of a raw nerve. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's so interesting this next paragraph I'm going to read because it deepens it, and then we do have an interview with her, and we're going to listen to it a couple of times. So we'll do that after I read this, and then give some context for what happened at the premiere. Actually, I'll let the clip do that. But I'm going to read this paragraph. I started writing Blasted in March of '93. I was 22. Originally, I was writing a play about two people in a hotel room in which the older man rapes the younger woman. At some point during the first couple of weeks writing, I switched on the television. Srebrenica was under siege. I was suddenly completely disinterested in the play I was writing. What I wanted to write about was what I'd just seen on TV. It gave me a dilemma. Did I abandon my play even though I'd written one scene I thought was really good in order to move on to a subject I thought was more pressing? Slowly, it occurred to me that the play I was writing was about this. It was about violence, about rape, and it was about these things happening between people who know each other and ostensibly love each other. And that's the genius of Blasted, which we'll get into a little further here as we go. So let me see. I have I've got my articles open. So we're gonna get right into Blasted. So this is her first play, and it was performed in 1995 at the Royal Court Theatre upstairs, which is little black box theater upstairs. I saw a lot of theater in this theater.
Give me a better, deeper image of that. So, like, how many seats are we talking?
It can vary depending on the nature of the production, but I believe Blasted seated 65, 66 people.
Oh, okay. Is it like a black box?
It is like a black box theater, and it's probably my favorite theater in the world. You are in Sloane Square, in London. It's always an intimate production. There's no proscenium here. You don't know what you're getting into. You may be standing the entire performance. And the things they do with the space are just tremendous. I love that intimate, poor feeling theater, even though it's not poor. Just the whole vibe is cool. And I saw some very wonderful plays there. It's definitely kind of close to my heart. Well, we're talking about the size of it. This is something that this is one of the most famous press nights of all time. So, and that's what we're going to get into here. And I'll let Sarah herself say it. I'm going to share the link in a minute, but you have to know that for the press night, it was mostly journalists there, mostly critics, which is an awful thing for any production if most of the house are people there to review it critically, because you're not going to have a real experience of the play. You're going to have these professionals there. They all know one another, and there's a certain, I guess, critical attitude toward the work, which is maybe not as generous as what I guess a more varied audience might bring. But it's also worth noting, well, you know what? Here, I'm going to play the clip. So let me send you the link here, Brad, and I want you to listen to 3 or 4 minutes from the 2nd minute mark of this clip, and then we'll come back.
We'll do.
All
right. There are playwrights who get bad reviews quite consistently. I can't think of any playwright who's got quite such personal, vitriolic, hostile reviews that you have. Why do you think that is?
Because they don't know what else to say. I honestly think that's true. If they don't know what to say about the work, they go for the writer or the director or the actors. And I think what happened with Blasted, it's quite hard to talk about the press response to my other plays because it's inevitably so clouded by what happened to Blasted, and everyone is constantly re-reviewing Blasted. I think Michael Billington must review Blasted more than any other play he's ever seen. I'm permanently reading about Blasted even now. But I think what happened on that particular press night, it was a bit strange. The court had programmed the play into a dead spot. They didn't really know what to do with it. A lot of the people in the building didn't want to do it. They were a bit embarrassed about it, so they put it into a spot just after Christmas where no one was going to the theatre anyway, and hopefully no one would notice. And it was in the theatre upstairs. And what usually happens in the theatre upstairs, which is about this size probably, is they have 2 press nights, because if you have one, then every single seat is full of press and it's completely unbearable. So you have 2, and then you have a slightly mixed audience on both nights. Because everyone was a bit haphazard at the court at that time, they failed to notice there was a major press night on at another theatre, the Almeida in London, on one of those press nights, so they were all coming on the same night anyway. So I was sitting at the back with a friend, and I looked round and realised, the director was somewhere near the front, everyone else was critic. I think there were about 3 other women in the audience. Everyone else was a middle-aged, white, middle-class man, and most of them had sort of plaid jackets on. And it was literally only at that point that I realised the main character in my play was a middle-aged male journalist who not only rapes his young girlfriend, but that is then raped and mutilated himself. And it suddenly occurred to me they weren't going to like it. It genuinely hadn't. I really thought they were going to like it. I thought, this is really good. I love it. And then the next morning, there was just complete chaos. My agent couldn't get off the phone to call me, and there were apparently tabloid journalists running around the Royal Court going, "Where is she? She's at home in bed." It's 10 o'clock in the morning. And a lot of it passed me by at the time. My father's a tabloid journalist. He very kindly didn't give my address to any other tabloid journalists, and they never caught up with me.
Right. So there is Sarah Kane herself with Dan Reboletto. You can find this entire interview on YouTube, and it's a very worthy listen. I think it's a great story. The reaction to the play was incredible. It made her the most infamous playwright in the English language, probably at the time. Yeah, at the ripe age of 23. Michael Billington, the most famous critic in the UK, very famously savaged it, as did the rest of them. I'm going to read a little bit.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
I like when the critics hate it, but it's like, yeah. This is good.
Right. So Cash Fury at vilest ever play, the Daily Mirror. So a play branded the most disgusting ever shown in Britain is costing more than £22,000 in taxpayers and charity money. Miss Kane, 23, daughter of Mirror reporter Peter Kane, said she was proud of the production. So they have a tabloid culture over there that is unlike anything else. I mean, we don't have anything remotely like it in the U.S. So this is the Daily Mirror writing about the daughter of one of its own reporters,
and just being disgusting.
Just awful. And here's Michael Billington. Billington actually reviewed my play over there at one point. So I'll go easy on him. He said about Sarah's about Blasted. Now, this, of course, would all be revisited later, but this was the 20th of January, 1995. I like the note she gave, too, about how they kind of sort of tried to bury the play after Christmas. We're going to hide this play upstairs after Christmas. It's
Maybe no one will notice.
Right. Yeah. It's only critics in the house on opening night, or on press night, rather. So she said, or Billington wrote, "I was simply left wondering how such naive tosh managed to scrape past the Royal Court's normally judicious play selection committee. The reason that the play falls apart is that there is no sense of external reality. Who exactly is meant to be fighting whom out on the streets? So full of horrors that we are reduced to bombed out indifference. This Farrago." Ouch! You wake up, that's not good.
Yeah, that's not good. But honestly, even in that, even if I didn't know, and I don't know much about the play, having never seen a production or read it, I can already sense well, they called her she said that they called her naive, but his criticism sounds naive to me, right?
Right. There clearly something was missing in translation, and the assessment in hindsight is that she was so ahead of everyone else in her vision in what she was communicating that
even the thing he says, like, it's not clear who's fighting who. Like, I can see that being the point. That
Yes.
it's like, it doesn't matter, right?
Right.
In modernity, everybody's fighting everybody all the
The
time,
the
right? So it
first
doesn't matter.
and the first, and we're going to go over Blasted beat by beat, or not beat by beat, but like sort of scene by scene. But the whole conceit of Blasted is that midway through the play itself blows up, and you leave a scene of domestic violence, rape in a hotel room, and enter a war zone. And the person who committed the heinous acts in the first act have similarly heinous acts visited upon them, the journalist, which I'm sure all these men saw themselves in that character too. So it probably was not easy. So the thesis of the play, if you must, is something to the effect of, we put the war over there, but in fact it's right here, and we just don't see it. Or there's resonances. There's a war going on in a hotel room in Leeds, and there's a war going on in Bosnia, and these are the same world. Even though our minds do everything to put them over there, put the atrocities over there. So yeah, here's a review from the Daily Mail, and this is Jack Tinker, and she would get revenge on Tinker later in another one of her plays by naming this a horrific character after him.
Nice.
Here he is. For utterly disgusted I was by a play which appears to know no bounds of decency, yet has no message to convey by way of excuse. Utterly without artistic merit.
Oof.
So honestly, I think that's great. I mean, if you're getting reviews like that, you're sticking it to them, right?
Yeah, for sure. And that kind of thing is going to raise eyebrows across the, there's going to be people who are like, oh, what's this? That's going to be attractive to some people. For sure.
Yeah. So the world premiere in 1995, directed by James McDonald, the premiere which prompted headlines labeling the play a disgusting feast of filth. Wonderful.
That's excellent. That's excellent.
Yeah. So here's what happens in the play, right? In the first scene, Ian, they're in a hotel room in Leeds, is a foul-mouthed middle-aged tabloid journalist. He's brought a young woman, Kate, who has a stammer, right? She's emotionally fragile. She sucks her thumb, right? In the first scene, Ian tries to seduce her. She resists. Ian is racist and homophobic. He's an awful character. In the second scene is the next morning, Ian engages in frottage with Kate during one of her fits. So this is a theme in Sarah Kane's plays, is masturbation. If you were not being generous, you'd go, everybody's always masturbating in these plays. Like, what is this all about? There's an awful lot of masturbation happening in her plays. Quite literally. It's very striking.
Okay, so if you were to see a production of it, say the original, is that obscured in some way, or is the character the actor actually matched?
I don't imagine that they're actually doing it on stage. Okay. I suspect it would depend on the production, but you do have decency laws. You can't be actually giving somebody a blowjob on stage. Where Kate performs oral sex on Ian, but at the end of the act, she bites him savagely, right? I'm not going to do this for all of the plays, but I want to walk you through Blasted just to give you an idea of what this play was and why in 1995 all of these plaid-wearing critics threw a fit.
The theater used to be judicious.
The theater,
right.
So this is where it's interesting. So Kate leaves for the bathroom, and this is where a soldier enters the room with a gun. Kate has escaped, and the hotel room has been struck by a mortar bomb.
Holy, right? Okay. Whoa.
And you're in like Leeds in England, and he's right. So suddenly the war is here, right? So now the hotel room is in ruins. The bomb has blasted a hole in the wall. The soldier and Ian are talking, and they're in the midst of a brutal war suddenly. The soldier's recounting all these horrible stories, rape, torture, genocide, and talks about how at one point he talks about how there's one way you can like impale somebody by sticking a pole up their rectum and bringing it outside the right shoulder in such a way that it doesn't kill them. and they die slowly, possibly even by starving. And later, and I believe it's in the interview that I played, Sarah talked about how it would always surprise her because people in rehearsal rooms, she would tell them where she drew this story from, and that came from the Bosnian Serbian conflict, right, where that had been done to numerous Muslims. That's how they were essentially it's a type of crucifixion in a way.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
And she would tell her actors, and her actors would throw a fit and be really unhappy, and she would go, well, you don't think I'm making this stuff up, right? Like, and that if you want to understand Sarah Kane, that's the thing to understand. She's not just coming up with these cruelties. She was drawing on real things that happened, and she would bring them in to her plays.
Yeah, this isn't just an indulgence of her fantasies or something.
Right. This isn't the Marquis de Sade sitting back writing about all the horrible things he wants to do. This is somebody who's reading the papers and saying, oh my God, although she would become an atheist, like, oh my gosh, like, we've got to deal with these things. So we're in the third scene here. The soldier says he's done everything as an act of revenge for the murder of his girlfriend. Now the soldier rapes Ian. So in the first act, Ian rapes Kate. And it happens between the scenes. You don't see it, but it's implied that he like bit her to the point where she's bleeding. It's extremely intense. She's bleeding, from her groin, awful. So then now Ian is raped by the soldier, and the soldier sucks out Ian's eyes. So he literally sucks out Ian's eyes. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. So we're really in the hurt now, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And so now we're into the fourth scene. Ian lies blinded next to the soldier. The soldier's blown his brains out.
The soldier blew his own brains out?
The soldier's blown his own brains out. By the way, I'm going back here to kidssearch.com. I'm trying to find more about Sarah Kane here at Kids Search. I'm kidding. We'll just do the high school production of Blasted.
Right. It's
Sarah Kane's hit new play, Blasted, Blasted by Disney, the Disney adaptation of the hit new play. So now the soldier's committed suicide. Ian is blind. Kate returns and is describing the city. At one point, she suggests she's going to go get food somehow, and he asks sort of, how are you going to do it? And she goes, well, the way that women have gotten food in wartime forever, right? Like the way that you would do it.
Right.
She returns, she has a baby. So Kate brings a baby back, right? The baby dies. She buries the baby in a hole in the floorboards and leaves. They argue about whether or not to pray during the burial. And in the fifth and final scene, maybe, you know what? Maybe I'll read the fifth and final scene of Blasted. What do you think?
Yeah, go for it.
You into this, Brad?
I am. This is intense. It does. I can see these sort of shades of Beckett in there.
Mm-hmm.
It's not there's no conventional sort of plot progression, right? It's just like a thing happens and then a thing happens and then, I was going to say it's an absurd situation one after the other, but it's not. Absurdity isn't right.
It descends into a Beckettian fever dream.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to read the entire final scene because it's quite long. But I'm going to read the very end. So they have an exchange. This is that point where Kate says what she's going to do. She's going to go get some food, right? She's hungry, so she leaves. Now, Ian, this is what happens. So Ian's masturbating.
Well, as one does.
Saying the word cunt. And then it says, darkness, light, Ian strangling himself. Darkness, light, Ian shitting and then trying to clean it up with newspaper. Darkness, light, Ian laughing hysterically. Darkness, light, Ian having a nightmare. Darkness, light, Ian crying huge bloody tears. He is hugging the soldier's body for comfort. Darkness, light. Ian lying very still, weak with hunger. Darkness, light. Ian tears the cross out of the ground which had been placed for the baby, rips up the boards and lifts the baby's body out. He eats the baby. He puts the sheet the baby was wrapped in back in the hole. A beat, then he climbs in after it and lies down, head poking out of the floor. He dies with relief. It starts to rain on him coming through the roof. Eventually, Ian, shit. Kate enters carrying some bread, a large sausage, and a bottle of gin. There is blood seeping from between her legs. Kate, you're sitting under a hole. Ian, I know. Kate, get wet. Ian, Kate, stupid bastard. She pulls a sheet off the bed and wraps it around her. She sits next to Ian's head. She eats her fill of the sausage and bread, then washes it down with gin. Ian listens. She feeds Ian with the remaining food. She pours gin in Ian's mouth. She finishes feeding Ian and sits apart from him, huddled for warmth. She drinks the gin. She sucks her thumb. Silence. It rains. Ian, thank you. Blackout.
Oof. Wow.
Can you pick
up? I could have done without the swear words.
Yeah. Oh, the swears are a bit much. Can you imagine, like, just the blue hairs at the Guthrie Theater? Right, they've signed up for their season tickets, right? At whatever theater.
Right. Well, you can imagine the critics too, just thinking like, I didn't get into this to sit here while this is happening. Like,
he eats the baby.
Oh my God.
Okay. What a stage direction. What a
right. And then as a director, you got to be sitting there thinking, like.
Well, it would get to be even more extreme in the other plays. There are a few other things about Blasted. Yeah. So that I really think I encourage you to read it. I mean, you can read Blasted in 45 minutes, an hour.
Sure, yeah.
But it's so you can tell from the writing, it is so mature for that age. I mean, no condescension. It's just like it's a fully formed dramatic voice. Enough to get a reaction from those critics like that. Here's what she said about the violence in Blasted. She said, "The violence in this play is completely deglamorized. It's just presented. Take the glamour out of violence and it becomes utterly repulsive. Would people seriously prefer it if the violence were appealing? You'd think people would be able to tell the difference between something that's about violence and something that's violent. I don't think it's violent at all. It's quite a peaceful play." And she went on to talk about the reviews a little bit. And I think we do have to dwell somewhat on this because it was such a major play and such a major moment in the theater. So she said, "The first previews of Blasted at the Royal Court, before I had any idea of quite how extreme the reaction was going to be, we had a couple of people walk out and it didn't surprise me. This was a big deal too, because this is a theater where I think I described it well enough earlier. If you're walking out, you're walking out. This is not like ducking out
the actors know. Yeah,
everybody knows. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but honestly, as for as silly and naive as I think the critics are, like, I am also not surprised that people walked out. I mean, I could definitely see that happening. I mean, people walk out on stand-up comedians. It's like,
sure,
yeah.
Well, so I have more things from her that I want to read. I've got something on the baby eating scene here. Just reading that, I gotta tell you, it does kind of get your heart racing. Something's going on.
Oh yeah, it's intense.
Yeah,
it's intense.
Yeah,
for sure.
Let me see here. Yeah, so the baby eating scene. Here she is on the baby eating scene. So you gotta imagine like this young lesbian in her early 20s, chain smoking, listening to Joy Division, and she's just put on this play that's completely upturned the establishment. But she's also a woman of the theater. She's not. They read her as, oh, this is somebody with daddy issues, which she probably had them, but this is somebody with daddy issues trying to push our buttons. And here's what she has to say about this. "A lot of people said to me when they read the scene before it was performed that they weren't sure about the baby eating scene." Can you imagine these conversations? Sarah, let's talk about the baby eating. I kept looking at the scene and thinking, is it gratuitous? What does gratuitous mean anyway?
Well, eating a baby is kind of on the line.
Yeah. I that might be a show title, the gratuitous Sarah Kane. And does it become unbelievable? Samuel Johnson said that when Shakespeare's King Lear is read, the blinding of Gloucester is somehow more acceptable than experiencing a performance of the play. I find the opposite. Reading Blasted is much harder work than watching it, because when you read it, the stage directions say he eats the baby. When you see the actual play, Ian's clearly not eating the baby. It's absolutely obvious. This is a theatrical image. So in a way, it's more demanding because it throws you back on your own imagination, but somehow it's more realistic because you simply get the act.
Because she's saying that when you stage it, there's no way you're going to make it look realistically like someone's eating a baby.
Precisely, right? Yeah, and of course you know that. Well, it's like you said, nobody's actually giving a blowjob on stage,
right.
So, and that's a level of intelligence and maturity and thinking about the theater that is beyond most people at that age.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah,
she's talking about Samuel Johnson and Shakespeare. She's in and of the theater, and I think that's one of the reasons she was able to upset it so much. Let me see here. So we're still dwelling in blasted, and the sort of reaction. So let's see here. Well, I want to read these as what I'm going to do is we have the 5 plays to go through. We're not going to go through every play with that level of detail, but there's a section in this book on the perceived bleakness of her work. And there are 5 paragraphs. So I'm going to read one of each of those at the very end. For each play.
Okay.
I've got a few more things about Blasted I want to get to. Here is the artistic director from the Royal Court at the time, Ian Rickson.
So this is the guy who directed it? Or?
This is the artistic director of the theater.
So this
would have been the guy who programmed and would have sort of been held ultimately responsible for this
he should have
crime of the theater.
Yeah, he was the one who was not judicious.
Right.
I love that word when it comes to art. Like, this art is supposed to be...
We're gonna gatekeep harder.
Right.
So this is the question: is what were your reactions to the press attention given to Blasted? Because it was, I don't know if I've communicated this enough. This was front page. This was Sarah Kane is a household name now, as a wicked enfant terrible. This was completely outsized. So
just immediately after press night.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
On the one hand, so this is Ian Rickson. On the one hand, you feel heartened that a small 60-seater house should have such impact. And that feels very encouraging when you worry that theater is in danger of becoming the equivalent of croquet in British sports. That is, it doesn't mean much, is a bit rarefied and deeply unfashionable. To have something speak to only 57 people, or however many the capacity was then, yet scorching its way onto the front pages and onto Newsnight is encouraging. Playwriting suddenly has vitality. But I think at the same time, we felt very under threat. We felt terrible for Sarah, who felt hunted and not understood, which was upsetting. But when you look at the history of the court, the Royal Court, it has always rallied when under threat, and it's often been strongest when it's against something. So the fact that it had the fortune to have this new play which really stirred up things, I think was a very good thing. But it wasn't pleasant at the time. There were tabloid journalists sneaking in, and Sarah at the time was only 23, so it wasn't good. Now, I got to put this in place too, because this is in Sloane Square I think it's in Kensington, or is it Kensington? Yes. I mean, it's central London. It's about as posh as it gets. So you're throwing this baby eating play into like the most desirable addresses in the world. Like, these are people who they're not told no very often. Just in these are like the winners of history. like
Right.
live and dwell in this general area. That's a bit of a simple.
Well, and then not only the baby eating, but you just, metaphorically blowing up,
Yes.
the whole hotel room blowing up is,
Correct.
yeah, no.
Yeah, and there's a whole awful age gap thing between Kate and Ian in that play where he's much older. It's very clear they used to be lovers. It's not clear how young she was when they used to be lovers. There's some awful implications there. It's like if a 25 or a 30-year age gap and the suggestion of near pedophilia isn't the most grotesque and intense thing about your play. Right. That's just where we're starting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. If Lolita, it's not a big deal.
Right. Yeah. Right. Very different things. Right. But yeah. So I have a second book here too. I have Love Me or Kill Me, also by Graham Saunders. And that's a line from one of the plays, one of the middle plays. I can't remember if it's Craved or Cleansed. I think it might be Cleansed. All these plays, Blasted, Crave, Cleanse, 448 Psychosis, very cool, kind of intense. So let me put this into context. I'm just finding it here. Some lovely pictures of her in this book. This is by the same fellow, Graham Saunders. Let's see here. She was very, very clearly interested in the idea of image being the language of the theater. And that's a huge trend in theater. This idea that we want to move away from dialogue driving theater. You want it to be moved by image.
Sure,
So let me see. I want to get this right. Let's see. Right. Yeah. So she really dealt with the Christianity in her life, right? So she wasn't evangelical and quite passionate about it as a teen, but she rejected it. And so this is interesting. So there's a quote about Ian and that image at the end. So she's saying this is an important thing about her work. The work is loose enough or sort of strong enough to withstand multiple interpretations, right? So these images can kind of mean different things. So here she is saying, there was one thing I really liked about it because it brought out a thing that I hadn't thought when I articulated it to the director, and he hadn't thought of it either. Ian says earlier, God, the cunt. And then when he's masturbating, cunt. It was really interesting because Pip Donaghy, the actor playing Ian, was looking up and it looked like he was praying. And it sets off all kinds of resonances about that thing about God being a cunt. And it was completely spontaneous. None of us had planned it at all. But I thought that was where the production takes over, which is good because it should start setting up its own resonances. That's all you look for as a writer.
Yeah.
And
it starts to live. It starts to live outside. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. And to be that aware as a playwright, I don't doubt she was aware of Sam Shepard too and Buried Child. I mean, there's a very similar thing in Buried Child where the child is revealed at the end, but she said a little more here too. So this is Graham writing here. This unwitting contribution to the debate about the existence of God and the question of life after death, already set up in the play, comes to a partial resolution in performance with the final image from the tableau scenes, where Ian is inside the infant's grave with water dripping onto his head. Quoting Sarah, Ian is deified in a way that I didn't really realize until I saw the play performed for the first time. When I watched the blood being washed away by the rain, I saw just how Christ-like the image is, which isn't to say that Ian isn't punished. He is, of course. He dies, and he finds that the thing he has ridiculed, life after death, really does exist. So that's what happens at the very end of the play. He dies, and he wakes up, and he's still there. And he's in hell.
Right.
And that life is worse than where he was before. It really is hell. So he does end up in hell at the end of the play is the implication, right? He dies, but he's still there, and Kate's going to come back to feed him sausages and gin for all eternity. as he's blind and in the floorboards, having just eaten a baby.
Right. Oh, now, yeah, right. Yeah, now you've got to live with that, and you're in a war zone. Yeah. Interesting.
So it really is. It's a play about a man's descent into hell in a funny way.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. That is.
Woo!
That's. Wow. Yeah.
Art of Darkness, playing the hits. We're playing the hits. Thank you, Sarah Kane.
Kids Search.
Let's go back to Kids Search. Let's see what Kids Search.
They have a link for Blasted.
Blasted play. Let's see. Do they have anything? Let me see what Kids Search has to say. It's with kids with the Z. Kidssearch.com. That is really, really funny.
It is. Yeah, this is one article where a parent who had told their kid they could only search things on Kids Search might say, "Hey, wait, what? What is this?"
So we're going to move on from Blasted, but I'm going to read the first of the 5 statements on bleakness in her work, which she made, because you can see how that might be the accusation. Let's assume you even understand the play, right? You get it. Oh, I see what you're doing. It's still like, geez, Sarah,
you still might say it's bleak.
Is everything all right at home? Right. You know what I mean? So here she is. Probably all my characters in some way are completely romantic. I think nihilism is the most extreme form of romanticism, and that I think is where the plays get misunderstood. I think I'm in a complete and I think I'm a complete and utter romantic in the tradition of Keats and Wilfred Owen. So she thought of herself as a romantic. Yeah.
Okay.
And you can certainly see this in the plays, and that I think actually serves as a nice dovetail into the second play, Phaedra's Love. But before we go there, I have to make a quick interlude into her one foray into screenwriting, which anybody can access on YouTube. Just look up Sarah Kane, Kane Skin. And it was the second thing that she worked on. And this is one of those things where, the play comes out from the Royal Court, right? It Blasted. And then by September of 95, she's written an 11-minute short, which Channel 4 Films produced, right? She's the hot thing, and we're going to make a movie, and let's see what happens, right?
Right.
So she wrote that in the summer of 95, and they debuted it on television, which is just, you see it, it's hard to believe. Was nominated for a Golden Bear category Best Short Film, Berlin International Film Festival. It's about a skinhead, so you can see why it might resonate in Berlin. She's the original airtime of 9:40 p.m. was pushed back because they were worried about the violence and the racism.
Yeah. At 10 o'clock, it'll be fine. But.
Yeah. Right. So let me see. So it's starring Ewan Bremner, who is you recognize him, I think, as Spud. Yeah, you recognize as Spud Murphy from Trainspotting. So you'll know him.
Yeah.
And he met his co-actor Marsha Rose, who's a black woman, which is the sort of the thrust of the whole idea. They became involved, and they had a child together. So that's fun. These actors meet. Yeah. So, and the plot here is that Billy, a young skinhead, joins in a racist attack on a black wedding party in Brixton. Then he finds himself drawn to a black woman whose flat he can see from his window. Mm-hmm. He visits her. They have sex, but then the power dynamic gets screwed up. She slaps him, feeds him dog food, and this is quite intense. She scrubs off his tattoos with bleach, including a tattoo of the Union flag. That was really hard to watch.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. He attempts to have an overdose, ends up being saved. It's dark, it's intense. I mean, is it a great short film? But is it worthwhile? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I know. I mean, a lot of actors who sort of fall for each other through, they meet on the set of a thing. But this one seems particular. So you just had a scene where she's like scrubbing a tattoo off of your body. And then afterwards, you're like, so do you want to get like a coffee or something?
Make a baby. let's go make a baby. But you'd be surprised. I mean, how these showmances form. You don't really know. You come together. It's really
it's
intense.
true. Well, it is intimate, and obviously,
Yeah.
you're playing roles, so it's not
Right.
but
Right. I did skip over a period in Sarah's life where she was like a literary assistant at the Bush Theatre in London, and that's sort of how her scripts got over to the Royal Court. There is a whole scene over there. There's just nothing like it. I mean, I guess the closest thing might be in New York City, but there's a certain quality over there that I really can't quite describe. I think it's just there's such a vibrant theater scene in London, and there's so many little theaters devoted to new writing. Just a tremendous scene over there. So let's put ourselves in time here. So it's 1995. She's had this play that the critics savaged. She's a household name. I believe it's at this point she became the writer in residence at Payne's Plough, which is a theater company in London that helped her out at that point. Because it was funny, the director there, I can't recall his name, but in the reading that I did, he was saying, she was a household name. She had no money. Like there was, how do you trade off that? Right. You're notorious as much as anything else. And it's not, is another thing about the poverty of the theater. It's not like she had dropped a hit album and was getting residuals. That play went up, that play got its reviews, that play came down, and it's a bit of a circus freak show. Right. And what are you going to do next? Now
a few hundred people had bought tickets, maybe.
Well, more than that, because you're doing that would have run for a couple of months, I assume.
Okay.
Especially after the controversy. I don't know how long it ran. So let's move on to Phaedra's Love, which is a very interesting play, which I'm actually quite partial to. Let me just get up what Brad, but while I'm looking for this, how has Blasted change your perception of Sarah Kane?
Well, I mean, I guess we're talking about how intense and brutal and not just us talking, but in the little bits that I had seen in her Wikipedia, I had sort of tried to imagine, well, what could it actually be, right? Like, what are the actual acts? And it's even, I guess, a little further than I thought, to be honest. But I get it. I see in your taking us through the beats of the play, I can see what she's doing, and it's pretty brilliant, actually. So this isn't like shock for shock's sake, No. It's all of a piece, and it makes sense, and it's smart, and there's something about that Blasted thing. It's the line of it is so simple, and not, I don't say that in a condescending way. It's one of those things that's so simple. It's like, how did somebody not already write this in a way? Yeah, like, because it's it's just
It's how we see things now, but we were not seeing things like that then. So in that way, it's completely prescient and a masterpiece. I may have gotten it out of order with Payne's Plough, but in any case, the next play, Phaedra's Love, it was a commission by the Gate Theatre, and so they commissioned her after Blasted. They said, "Why don't you write a play inspired by a classic?" So that's kind of fun, right? Here's this playwright who's just done the play that I described. And they're like, what are you going to make out of a classic, Sarah Kane? Let's see. So Phaedra's Love was loosely based on Seneca's play Phaedra, but it's put in a contemporary setting. And it's a reworking of the myth of Phaedra's doomed love for her stepson, Hippolytus. Hippolytus takes the central role, and his emotional cruelty pushes Phaedra to suicide. And this is very interesting. And this is another dramatic gesture or dramaturgical gesture that Kane makes, which sticks with us and which I've never forgotten. She reversed the classical tradition by showing rather than describing violent action on stage. So when you think about these classic plays, someone will walk off or come on stage and announce so-and-so has slain so-and-so and torn out the eyes of so-and-so, and everyone gasps. And Kane's approach was, nope, we're going to show it. we're going to see this guy's eyes get sucked off. We're going to sucked out. We're going to see, in this case, what happens to Hippolytus. And she described it, and this is very funny. She described it as my comedy. It's so dark. She directed it at the Gate Theater in '96. So you can see here, clearly the theater has embraced her. Right. I mean, you're going to get a commission. So let's, the cover of this, the Methuen edition of this is so cool. It's got a vulture on the cover, which you'll see sort of what that means. But let me read the plot. I'm just going to read you the plot of Phaedra's Love. The play opens with Hippolytus cleaning semen and snot with socks that are lying about his room. He's watching television. It's sort of a modern. He's watching trash television. He's described as fat and his room is in disarray. Shortly thereafter, Phaedra, his stepmother, is talking to a doctor about Hippolytus's well-being. The doctor deduces Phaedra's romantic attraction for her stepson and warns her against consummating her affection. She confides in her daughter, Strophe, who likewise warns Phaedra against pursuing an affair with Hippolytus. So we've got verboten love, right? This is the love that can't be expressed, right?
Right.
Phaedra approaches Hippolytus regardless of the warnings she has heard. Hippolytus openly speaks about his multiple sexual partners and reinforces how he doesn't care for any of them and won't care for Phaedra. There's this funny thing in this play where it's clear how grotesque Hippolytus is, but he's a prince, and so everybody loves him. He's super popular. So there's this like funny politics in this. It really is actually quite comical. And of course, you have to remember, again, this is the royal borough. I don't know where the Gate Theater is, but we're in London, and they do have a different relationship with royalty than we do, right? And you got to remember, this is the daughter of a tabloid journalist. So now she's taking on royalty and all the rest of it, right? So Phaedra confesses her love for Hippolytus, but he spurns her, telling her she will only be hurt. She fillets him. He's unresponsive, but he reaches a climax. He does assert himself at the end. So again, we've got a blowjob on stage, right? We've got this act on stage. So this actor gets to, show you Hippolytus having an O and sort of savage. Yeah. Okay, fun, right? Let's go out for a date, honey. Let's go out and watch. Yeah. During the interaction, Hippolytus informs Phaedra that he has had sex with his stepsister, Strophe, and that Strophe, Phaedra's biological daughter, has also had sex with Theseus, Phaedra's husband and Hippolytus's father. It is later revealed that Strophe had sex with Theseus on the night Theseus and Phaedra were married. Ooh. So he's watching at the beginning, he's watching like crappy TV. He's watching Days of Our Lives or whatever, right? So that's what this is too, right? It's very funny. Yeah. Afterwards, Phaedra kills herself, leaving behind a note that states Hippolytus has raped her. So, whoa doggy. Yeah. Whilst in prison, Hippolytus speaks with a priest who eventually performs fellatio on Hippolytus. So Hippolytus is irresistible. He just keeps getting it from the priest, In the final sequence, well, let me see, because I think I might want to do the final sequence here. It's the final countdown. Yeah, love will tear us apart again, Brad. I know, right? So it's so intense. Yeah. There's just maybe too much of this. There's an awful lot that happens at the end. But I will read the very end here. So where did I get to? Right. So let's see. Strophe confronts Hippolytus about the accusation, but he refuses to deny or confirm the allegation, though the subtext implies that he did not. So he's been unjustly accused of raping his stepmother. And it's going to completely destroy the kingdom and his life and everything, right? So again, whilst in prison, Hippolytus speaks with the priest. The priest does the act on him. Now, in the final sequence, Theseus has returned home and disguises himself in a crowd. Strophe, unbeknownst to Theseus, has done the same. She publicly defends Hippolytus, and Theseus responds by raping and killing her.
Jeez.
His own daughter. So we're going hard at, well, let's do an adaptation of the classics. How do we update this for a modern audience, right? The enraged mob rips Hippolytus limb from limb, and his father disembowels him. So yeah, let's read this. So Strophe's been raped by her own father. Theseus, Hippolytus, innocent mother, oh mother, she dies. The first man pulls down Hippolytus's trousers. Woman 2 cuts off his genitals. They are thrown onto the barbecue. The children cheer. A child takes them off the barbecue and throws them at another child who screams and runs away. Much laughter. Someone retrieves them and they are thrown to a dog. Theseus takes the knife. He cuts Hippolytus from groin to chest. Hippolytus's bowels are torn out and thrown onto the barbecue. He is kicked and stoned and spat on. Hippolytus looks at the body of Strophe. Hippolytus, Strophe, Theseus, Strophe. Theseus looks closely at the woman he has raped and murdered. He recognizes her with horror. When Hippolytus is completely motionless, the police who have been watching wade into the crowd, hitting them randomly. The crowd disperses with the exception of Theseus. 2 policemen stand looking down at Hippolytus. Let's see here. I want to go all the way again. It's too good. Policeman 1, poor bastard. Policeman 2, you joking? He kicks Hippolytus hard. I've got 2 daughters. Policeman 1, should move him. Policeman 2, let him rot. Policeman 2 spits on Hippolytus. They leave. Hippolytus is motionless. Theseus is sitting by Strophe's body. Theseus. I got the names wrong. Hippolytus, son, I never liked you. To Strophe, I'm sorry. Didn't know didn't know it was you. God forgive me, I didn't know. If I'd known it was you, I'd never have. To Hippolytus, you hear me. I didn't know. Theseus cuts his own throat and bleeds to death. The 3 bodies lie completely still. Eventually, Hippolytus opens his eyes and looks at the sky. Vultures, he says. He manages a smile. If there could have been more moments like this. He dies. A vulture descends and begins to eat his body. Love will tear us apart again. I mean, whoa, doggy.
Yeah. What is that? If there could have been more moments like this, that's an interesting move.
That comes from earlier in the play where he's just so bored and so dead and numb to everything and does not care for life or for death. At one point he says life is too long. I also think there's a metaphor in that too, because that's why you come to the theater.
Right.
You come to the theater to see the violence and to see the cruelty. And of course the vultures descending at the end are the audience. Yeah. Right. That's the vulture. Right.
Wow.
So you have this like perfect metaphor. And the dead kings on stage and all of it. It's got everything. And she's aware of the theatrical tradition that she's disrupting or playing with. And
So that comes out the next year after Blasted.
Yeah. So she's not playing around, right?
No, not at all. Holy smokes.
Yeah. So it's not clear to me how that was received. But she continues to have a career. Let me see. I have some a few things on Phaedra's Love. I really like this play. It's a fun read, and the humor of her work. This is the one that has the most, I think, open kind of humor. You can kind of see it being a little bit funny if it's played properly. The barbecuing his genitals. All right, let's see. So we have Phaedra's Love. There are a few things she said about this. Directing this. The thing that I felt quite strongly about was that in lots of productions of Blasted, sometimes I was looking at the stage and I wasn't seeing exactly the images I had written. And so I thought that if I direct Phaedra's Love myself, there's no one to blame. If the image doesn't happen, it's completely my own fault. And I find out how difficult it is, and it turned out to be a lot easier than you would think it is. I mean, you write something like, his bowels are torn out, and that seems an incredibly difficult thing to do. But actually, audiences are really willing to believe something is happening if you give them the slightest suggestion that it is. That's a good insight into plays and playwriting, for sure, and to drama. People are the vulture. They're hungry for the drama.
Right.
She also said on the sort of poetics and Greek tragedy, I wanted to keep the classical concerns of Greek theater, love, hate, death, revenge, suicide, but use a completely contemporary urban poetry. I see the writing as poetic, not just verse. So I think that's quite interesting. You can sort of hear the poetry. And one more about this play. So this is the idea of the convention of Greek tragedy representing violence off stage. I mean, if you're not going to see what happens, why not stay at home? Why pay £10 to not see it? The reported deaths in Seneca are incredibly strongly written, conjuring the image really well. But personally, I'd rather have an image right in front of me. So that's really fun. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. She knew what she was doing.
Yeah. I have to, and now I want to talk a little bit about her. This is very important. This is about her own inner life and Christianity, right? So here's what she says. Hard to believe, I know, but I was a fervent, born-again, charismatic, spirit-filled Christian. In a sense, it's what Phaedra's love is about. Like Hippolytus, I committed the unforgivable sin, which is knowing that God is real and consciously deciding to reject him. I believed in God, but not the lifestyle that Christianity demanded. I knew a lot of Christians who I thought were fundamentally bad people, and a lot of non-Christians who I thought were utterly beautiful, and I couldn't understand that. So I made a conscious decision to reject God, and gradually my beliefs subsided. According to the Bible, I am now utterly damned. The point in Phaedra's love is that if you're not sure God exists, you can cover your ass, living your life just in case, as the priest does, or you can live your life as you want to live it. If there is a God who can't accept the honesty of that, then, well, tough.
Wow.
So that's quite intense. I mean,
yeah, that's
yeah.
Huh. Yeah, that's a little different than just being like, yeah, I don't really see the argument.
Yeah, I'm not
God.
really. I don't think that there's a God. She clearly felt strongly about it, and I wouldn't doubt that feeling of being damned may have. She was clinically depressed, but this was a very.
But there's also where if you're already damned, like, might as well go all the way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
If you're gonna get in trouble from mom and dad the next day, you might as well have a good time.
Go hard.
Kind of thing. Yeah.
Go hard. Yeah. Well, so I'm gonna save some of this business about violence until later. Although a couple of more things, or one more thing on Phaedra's love, and then the bleakness quote for Phaedra's love. She said on the violence in that play, we made a decision that I would try to do the violence as realistically as possible. If it didn't work, then we'd try something else, but that was a starting point to see how it went. The very first time we did the final scene with all the blood and the false bowels, by the end, we were all severely traumatized. Wow. All the actors were standing there covered in blood, having just raped and slit their throats. And then one of them said, "This is the most disgusting play I've ever been in." And he walked out. But because of the work we'd done before, all of us knew that point was reached because of a series of emotional journeys that had been made. So none of us felt it was unjustified. It was just completely unpleasant.
Wow.
All right. Back to the second of 5 quotes about the bleakness of her work. Here's what she had to say. My plays certainly exist within a theatrical tradition, though not many people would agree with that. I'm at the extreme end of the theatrical tradition, but they are not about other plays. They are not about methods of representation. On the whole, they are about love and about survival and about hope. And to me, that is an extremely different thing. What she's talking about there too is this, at that period in film, like her equivalent would probably be Tarantino, right?
Sure.
And she would make the point that one, she wanted to write plays that could only be plays. I want to make plays that are not going to be adapted. I don't ever want to sell the rights. These are plays that have got to be done in the theater, and I admire that greatly. But also, she did make the point at some juncture that Tarantino's movies are about movies, right? Yeah. Every shot is a reference to some other movie, or if not directly, then sort of in an indirect way. Her plays were not about plays. Her plays were original worlds. And sort of live on their own. Yeah. Okay. So where are you sitting with Sarah Kane now, Brad? I know I'm throwing a lot at you.
I'm on her team, man. Like, it's interesting. You see these two plays and it's like, what is she going to do next? Right. It's like, the one thing I almost get worried about in terms of like a lifelong artistic project for somebody like this is like, when you've sort of blown all the doors off, well, then what do you do?
Right. It's sort of hard to imagine Sarah Kane getting a real estate license and selling homes.
Right. Well, and then
Chiswick
there's the thing too is, she's going to develop an audience and a fan base or whatever, people who come to see her plays, and especially being young. Well, she seems like she's got so much artistic integrity and so much self-possession. I mean, at least in what she produces. I don't know about in her personal life, but you would think, you do that at 22 or 23, you have this big hit. There might be a tendency to just be like, well, I'll just keep giving them what they want, I guess.
Yeah.
That's what they want. So, all right, well, what kind of vulnerable human being are we going to eat in the next play? Like, you could see yourself falling into that kind of, and so I almost feel like a little worried about her artistic career at this point, that she could get kind of pigeonholed into doing something that might not allow her to grow the way that she clearly could, because she's clearly brilliant.
Yeah, it's very insightful, Brad. Very insightful. Well, so I think it's important just to pause and talk a little bit about her personal life, because we are moving very quickly. She struggled with severe depression for many years, and this is something that I really have a hard time. How do I say this? I can empathize with it. I have a hard time understanding someone with like this level of greatness and this amount of talent suffering that much from depression. And I understand that it's chemical, and I'm not judging anything, but it's this case of like, you're so brilliant. Like, can't somebody reach through all that pain and reassure you that, no, we need Sarah Kane,
and you're getting and in this case, you're getting applauded for it, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a certain sense when you see an artist who is talented and dedicated, and they hit a certain age and nothing ever happened, where it's like, that's a bummer.
Yeah, right. You should be maybe a little depressed. You've written your fourth play, and it's sitting in your closet, and nobody cares. Yeah.
Right.
It's tough. I didn't really. I can't word what I'm trying to say. It's just this. There is this angst over a life like this, which I think is justified. And in any case, she was admitted to the Maudsley Hospital in London in Camberwell twice voluntarily over the years, and used to live right over there for a little bit.
Right on.
She took antidepressants reluctantly. Her agent, Mel Kenyon, that's the agent, said that Kane told her she didn't like taking pills because they numbed her response to the world, which is, of course, what they're supposed to do. Yeah. But as an artist, it's extraordinarily difficult if your responsive level is made less intense. What do? Take pills and take away the despair? But despair also engenders knowledge in some way, and that knowledge fuels your understanding of the world and therefore your writing. But at the same time, you want to exercise the despair. she tried to weigh it up all the time. So she was measuring, and it's almost a cliche, right? Like, do I take these pills, in order to function and to live and to not want to kill myself, or do I, lean harder into the intensity of my own work and my own writing?
Right. That's a hard bargain to make.
Yeah. So that's what's on the table right now, for her. So it's no joke. No joke.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So we'll move on to the third play. Well, actually, there's another note on depression here. She was talking about Phaedra's Love, how the play deals with the theme of depression. And she said about this, through being very, very low comes an ability to live in the moment because there isn't anything else. What do you do if you feel the truth is behind you? Many people feel depression is about emptiness, but actually it's about being so full that everything cancels itself out. You can't have faith without doubt. And what are you left with when you can't have love without hate?
Oof. Yeah.
That's a poet. Poet.
Yeah.
And
wrestling with like the biggest questions and conundrums and paradoxes of being a person, right?
Without a doubt. Yeah. So she's got this residency at Payne's Plow. She had the very provocative Blasted. She's done her adaptation of a classic, and now she's going to turn herself to a new play, and the play is called Cleansed. And so let's talk a little bit about Cleansed. It premiered at the Court downstairs in 1998. So the bigger theater, right? So this is the Court really saying, this is the real deal here. We're taking her off the Christmas, New Year's rotation upstairs. She's coming to play in the majors now, right? I mean, that's sort of what the gate is. But it's not this is an original play, her second original play, not adapted. And it was at the time the most expensive production in the Court's history. And that's because there are some really impossible stage directions here. At one point, she says that the stage suddenly becomes covered in flowers. I think it's daffodils. So you have to do this, right?
Right.
Yeah. Now, she claimed that the play was inspired from reading a part of Roland Barthes' work, A Lover's Discourse, where he says, the situation of a rejected lover is not unlike the situation of a prisoner in Dachau.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So the stage direction, this is where Tinker comes back as this awful, horrific, sadistic doctor who is, and that's a shout out to Tinker, the critic. Very funny.
Right.
So it's set in a university, but it's more of a torture chamber or a concentration camp overseen by the sadistic Tinker. It places a young woman and her brother, a disturbed boy, a gay couple, and a peep show dancer. All are in this world of extreme cruelty in which declarations of love are tested. There's this iconic scene between the two gay lovers where the one wants an admission of love. Your love is going to be forever. And the other says, don't make me lie to you.
Oof.
Don't make me lie to you. But I love you now. This is what we have.
Right.
And the play pushes the limits of the theater. There's a stage direction that says, a sunflower pushes through the floor and grows above their heads. And another stage direction says, the rats carry Carl's feet away.
That's
fun.
Yeah.
Fun.
What are the people, the name of the people who build the sets? There's like a industry name. Grips?
Designers.
Yeah. I just imagine sitting in the back room, be just like smoking cigarettes and just being like, I don't know how we're gonna
Yeah. Well, and again, they're saying, sometimes claim that Tinker was named after the theater critic for the Daily Mail. But there does not appear to be any evidence of Kane confirming this. I'm going to say it's named after him.
I mean, come on. So far, she's had 10 characters total, and the one is named Tinker.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, look, so The play is set in a university operating as an institution designed to rid society of its undesirables, where a group of inmates try to save themselves through love while under the rule of the sadistic Tinker. Yeah, very intense. And Simon Kane, who is the executor of her estate, remarked
like
that
her brother or something?
Her brother,
Okay.
brother, claimed that overseas many people think that Cleansed is her best play.
Okay.
I'm not going to go through the entire synopsis, but I'm going to go through. It's there's a lot here. I have it in front of me right now. It's extremely violent. At one point, I believe it's Carl, the character who's sort of methodically being tortured over the course of the play, has his tongue torn out. On stage, this business about like having a pole shoved up your, that's here. It's just extremely, brutal and dark. And it reaches to sort of the depths of what's possible in terms of the stage. And, let me see here. So I'm just going to read scene 8 real quick. A patch of mud just inside the perimeter fence of the university. It is raining. The sound of a football match in progress on the other side of the fence. A single rat scuttles between Rod and Carl. Rod, baby. Carl looks at Rod. He opens his mouth. No sound comes out. Rod, you have watched them crucify me. Carl tries to speak. Nothing. He beats the ground in frustration. He scrabbles around in the mud and begins to write while Rod talks. Carl's had his tongue cut out. Rod, and the rats eat my face. So what? I'd have done the same, only I never said I wouldn't. You're young. I don't blame you. Don't blame yourself. No one's to blame. Tinker is watching. He lets Carl finish what he is writing, then goes to him and reads it. He takes Carl by the arms and cuts off his hands. Right?
Ow.
Tinker leaves.
Yeah.
Carl tries to pick up his hands. He can't. He has no hands. Rod goes to Carl. He picks up the severed left hand and takes off the ring he put there. He reads the message written in the mud. Say you forgive me. He puts on the ring. I won't lie to you, Carl. The rat begins to eat Carl's right hand. God. So I mean, we're
this
dealing.
Has got like a nightmare. Well, I guess Blasted did too. There's a nightmarish quality to this, right? There's like a logic to it that is feels inescapable and would be unsettling to watch. I think if there was any suspension of disbelief as an audience member at all. Yeah.
Oof. Right. So here's some of the things that are said about it. So she said that she started writing Cleansed before Blasted was even staged. Took her 3 years to finish the play. Mark Ravenhill, who's a famous playwright, said, Kane told me she wrote Cleansed when she was in love and that the play was not written by a person who knew she would commit suicide. Kane sent a draft of the play to Edward Bond, who's a heavy-duty playwright. Bond sent a letter to Kane in 1997, and he wrote he suspected that Cleansed is even more powerful than Blasted because it takes any 2 or 3 minutes of Blasted and subjects them to great pressure. The play was commissioned very quickly. By the court. This is important. So she claimed she had written Cleansed as a play that would only work as a piece of theater and could not be adapted to other dramatic mediums. Quoting, I made the deliberate decision to write something that couldn't be film or television. Some people will argue that it can't be theater either, but I want to stretch the theatrical language. Theater might not be hip and cool, but at least, Sarah, your theater is hip and cool. Yeah. But at least, wherever you are, but at least there isn't any direct censorship, and you're never going to have that with film or TV.
Yeah. Well, that's true. Yeah.
Yep. She directed a production of Wojciech at the Gate in Notting Hill in 1997. And she claims that she based the structure of Cleansed on Wojciech. I don't know how true or not that is, but I would take her at her word.
Okay.
So, I mean, there's just a ton of stuff in here. It's Twelfth Night. It's The Ghost Sonata. It's The Trial, Kafka, Orwell, 1984. It's all there. Very, very difficult play. This is quite intense. She stated that she based the character of Robin in the play on a young black man who was on Robben Island with Mandela. He was 18 years old. He was put on Robben Island and told he was going to be there for 45 years. It didn't mean anything to him because he was illiterate. Didn't mean a thing. 45 years, I had no clue. Nelson Mandela and some of the other prisoners taught him to read and write. He learned to count, realized what 45 years meant, and hung himself. So she was pulling from, pulling from true stories. Apparently Cleansed was going to be the second part of a loose trilogy on the subject of war that began with Blasted.
Okay, so Blasted. Okay.
Yeah, but it's more, so she said the link between Blasted and Cleansed is thematic rather than narrative.
Yeah.
For the simple reason that everyone at the end of Blasted is dead.
Well, that makes it yeah, you just do a prequel.
Yeah.
Could have done a prequel.
Yeah, there you go. Right. Oh, yeah.
With
don't
better
even get me
effects,
started
like
about
Star Wars.
the Many Saints of Newark. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Oh, no. It should. Oh, Jesus. Right. Don't.
Well, how would it have been?
Yeah,
good,
sure.
honestly?
How do you really feel, Kevin?
Yeah.
So she was going to, so let's see. So the trilogy will eventually amount to 3 responses to war. However, she then said to the interviewer, I've changed my mind about what the trilogy is about just in that second. They are not about war at all, but about faith, hope, and love in the context of war. Blasted is about hope. Cleansed is about love. Scrap the bit before the war. It's suddenly become clear to me. So it's not about war. It's about what's happening in and around this stuff. It's funny. According to Simon Kane, she only wrote a very rough first draft of the third in the trilogy. It was going to be called Viva Death.
Whoa.
Oh, boy. Yeah. So.
Oh, Sarah.
I know, right? Intense. Yeah.
We love you.
Yeah.
We love you, but we're worried about you.
Yeah, right. How are things at home? Yeah. I said that before. The play is notable for its many difficult to achieve stage directions, which have been described as impossible. Examples include Tinker produces a large pair of scissors and cuts off Carl's tongue. A sunflower bursts through the floor and grows above their heads. The rats carry Carl's feet away. Fun. So I have a few other things about this, and then we will move on. And you feel like you need maybe a little bit of I might need to be cleansed after all of this. There's a certain quality of just like, oh, geez.
Yeah, I'll probably before bed tonight. I'll probably watch like a couple dumb TikToks.
Yeah. Hang out with the talk. So let's see. Here's something she said about Cleansed. I was having a particular sort of fit about all of this naturalistic rubbish which was being produced, and I decided I wanted to write a play that could never be turned into a film or shot for television or turned into a novel. The only thing that could ever be done with it was that it could be staged. Believe it or not, that play was Cleansed. And then on the theme of love, if you want to write about extreme love, you can only write about it in an extreme way. Otherwise, it doesn't mean anything. So I suppose both Blasted and Cleansed are about distressing things which we'd like to think we would survive. If people could still love after that, then love is the most powerful thing. When I was working on Cleansed, I was in a very extreme state. I was going through the most appalling depression, and it was about that. But then on the other hand, I was so completely, utterly, and madly in love that those two things didn't seem to be any contradiction at all. These days it does. Sometimes when I read Cleansed, it's like it's by another writer. I, as I am now, could not write it. But it was never about the violence. It was about how much these people love. I think Cleansed, more than any of my other plays, uses violence as a metaphor.
Yeah. I mean, based on our interrogation of it, I can see that. Yeah.
So she was deeply, deeply in love, and When you lose the object of love, she said, you have none of the normal resources to fall back on. It can completely destroy you. And very obviously, concentration camps are about dehumanizing people before they are killed. I wanted to raise some questions about these two extreme and apparently different situations. Yeah. It's talking about the meaning of the ritual dismemberment. But for me, it's not about someone writing down how much he loves someone so he gets his hands chopped off. It's not about the actual chop. It's about the person no longer being able to express love with his hands. And what does that mean? I think the less naturalistically you show these things, the more likely people are to be thinking, what does this mean?
Right. So I can see that she's getting some like theatrical distance from it to kind of hold it out there as I can see that. Yeah.
Yep. So we're going to read the third of 5 comments on bleakness. Woo! Awesome. Through being very, very low comes an ability to live in the moment because there isn't anything else. What do you do if you feel the truth is behind you? Many people feel depression. I already read this, but I'm going to read it again. Many people feel depression is about emptiness, but actually it's about being so full that everything cancels itself out. You can't have faith without doubt. And what are you left with when you can't have love without hate? So I already read that once before, but I think it's quite good. So this is this is an intense person who's feeling things.
I love that.
Yeah. So let's, and we're moving forward in time here too. So we're getting into the later 90s here, and we're going to get on to her fourth play. It's the final play that was done in her lifetime. So Crave, as soon as you see it, doesn't look like the other plays on the page. If you get a copy of this play, it's literally 4 characters, or it calls for 4 actors, and their names are simply C, M, B, and A. That's it. C, M, B, and A. And in that interview that I mentioned, the YouTube interview, she talks about the A standing for, among other things, Aleister Crowley. Also anarchy. The M stands for mother. A also stands for author. I can't remember what they all stand for, but it's this strange structure for a play. And I'm just going to read, just to give you an idea of what this is. I don't know if you can hear the paper crinkling.
Oh yeah, it's very setting the ambiance.
Yeah, in the theater of the mind. So it's just this. C, you're dead to me. B, my will reads, fuck this up and I'll haunt you for the rest of your fucking life. C, he's following me. A, what do you want? B, to die. C, somewhere outside the city, I told my mother you're dead to me. B, no, that's not it. C, if I could be free of you without having to lose you. A, sometimes that's not possible. M, I keep telling people I'm pregnant. They say, how did you do it? What are you taking? I say I drank a bottle of port, smoked some fags, and fucked a stranger. B, all lies. C, he needs to have a secret, but he can't help telling. He thinks we don't know. Believe me, we know. And this goes on and on. And the article here is saying there was a change of critical opinion with this play. This was presented at Payne's Plough, by Payne's Plough at the Traverse Theatre in Edinburgh in 98. This was performed under the pseudonym of Marie Kelvedon. So she did not release this play as Sarah Kane. Yeah. She didn't want, she didn't want her reputation to come with it. So,
wow, that is interesting. I mean, gosh, you're 26 or 5 or whatever, and you've already got to geez, interesting.
Yeah. So there's obviously a lyrical writing style inspired by the Bible and the wasteland, 4 characters named after the alphabet. And presumably the critics started to turn around here based on that. The gender of the characters are only identifiable from the context of the play. It's a huge stylistic departure. This is funny. So her middle name was Marie, and it was based on Kelvedon was based on the village of Kelvedon Hatch, where she grew up. She put this fictitious biography in the program notes. Marie Kelvedon is 25. She grew up in Germany in British forces accommodation and returned to Britain at 16 to complete her schooling. She was sent down from St. Hilda's College, Oxford, after her first term for an act of unspeakable Dadaism in the college dining hall. She's had her short unspeakable Dadaism. She is the unspeakable Sarah Kane. Do you like that more than the
that's not bad.
Yeah. I think we got our title, so we'll call it the unspeakable Sarah Kane. She's had her short stories published in various European literary magazines and has a volume of poems, Enzever, impure, published in Belgium and Holland. Her Edinburgh Fringe Festival debut was in 1996, a spontaneous happening through a serving hatch to an audience of one. Since leaving Holloway, she has worked as a minicab driver, a roadie with the Manic Street Preachers, and as a continuity announcer for BBC Radio World Service. She now lives in Cambridgeshire with her cat, Gritowski.
Okay.
Manic Street Preachers are amazing. If you don't know Manic Street Preachers, you got to listen to the album The Holy Bible. So it doesn't surprise me that she was mentioning them. Bjork references or has lyrics called "An Echo, a Stain" on the album Vespertine, based on this play. Yeah. So, right. Here's what she says about A, B, C, and M. They have very specific meanings. I am prepared to tell you. Which is A is many things, which is author, abuser, because they are the same thing, author and abuser. Alistair is an Alistair Crowley, who wrote some interesting books, which some of you might like to read. Antichrist. My brother came up with Arsehole, which I thought was quite good. And there was also the actor who I originally wrote it for, who was called Andrew. So that's how A came about. M was simply,
if you're Andrew, that's got to be nice to see that that little nod. Asshole, abuser,
Antichrist,
Antichrist.
And
me.
Deal.
I'm in there too. That's
cool. Yeah, some actors, man, it can be real. Yeah. M was simply mother, B was boy, and C was child. But I didn't want to write those things down because then I thought they'll get fixed in those things forever and never ever change. So do you see that we are ripping the form apart? We are doing something differently.
Yeah. She's working herself up to like not have anything left, right? Like destroy the form, and then it's like at some point,
What next?
Anyway, we'll get there because I'm curious. This might be one of the more interesting. What is she doing? What would she be doing now?
It's coming. It's coming. Yeah. The play does have the dark themes, though, right? Rape, incest, pedophilia, anorexia, drug addiction, mental instability, murder, and suicide. She's playing all the hits again, right? We're back for more. Yeah. With Crave, and what a great name for a play. I have to get my book here. One moment. Here it is. I've got so many papers. Let's see. Can you tell I had a time working on this one, Brad?
Yeah, man. There was some digging. You did some digging. That's great.
Yeah.
Oh, it's paying off. This is enthralling.
Yeah. So, I mean, she found a copy of Fassbinder's Paradise Sorry Now, which I started to read. I don't know what that is, but she had the idea for it. She had a 20-minute version after 3 days of writing, did a reading at lunchtime, and she realized how much farther she could go with the musicality of it. We're talking about the first British production. Vicky Featherstone, the director, has done everything in her power to make it a performance in the true sense of the word. For me, watching the actors perform is a little like watching Man U. When they fly, they take off together, and when they don't, the collapse is truly ensemble. This is quite good. We also had a nasty injury scare. During the second preview, Paul Hickey, who played B, had to stop the performance due to sudden paralysis on one side of his face.
Whoa.
The entire company was aghast, fearing he'd had a stroke. The doctor assured us it was merely hyperventilation, overacting. caused by the ludicrous demands set by my text and Vicky's insistence on performance. But it's only by making such demands that there's a chance of accurate expression of ideas and emotion and direct intellectual, emotional, and physical contact with the needs of the audience. She's talking like somebody who's an old madam of the stage.
Yeah, right.
With
like,
so much command and assuredness. It's just incredible.
I guess that's a really good point. I guess I was expecting, when we started digging into this, because of her age, I was expecting it to be her perspective to be a little more primal than this, just like, just raw nerve emotionality, which is maybe where some of what she was drawing on. But yeah, she does seem like she understands the medium inside and out. It's pretty fascinating.
Well, I have to read a few more paragraphs about her thinking on this, and this has to do with the lack of optimism. She said, I think Crave, where there is no physical hope whatsoever, it's a very silent play, is the most despairing of the things I've written so far. At some point, somebody says something has lifted, and from that moment on, it becomes apparently more and more hopeful. But actually, all the characters have given up. It's the first one of my plays in which people go, F this, I'm out of here. Crave was written during the process of ceasing to have faith in love. And it's odd that at that stage, I seemed to write something that was less violent and maybe ultimately less depressing for other people. The way the play was received surprised me, as it was said to be extremely positive in tone. My previous work was called Very Despairing, but there was a ray of hope, some people felt. But for me, this play is about despair and suicide. It was written at a time when I felt quite despairing. That is probably the reason why. And then, yeah, she does say that she has no intention. There's a line, a sequence where she gives a series of numbers, and she says, none of you knows what they mean. I'm the only person that knows besides the actors, and I have no intention of telling anyone what it means. So I can't possibly expect to ever see the same production twice.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. So we are rapidly approaching the conclusion of this part of Sarah Kane. Obviously, I hope people will stick around for the little episode at the end from Patreon.
Yeah.
Let me see here. We gotta keep doing the bleakness business. 4 or 5. Yeah. Let's see what she has to say. All right. I didn't find my own plays depressing or lacking in hope, but then I am someone whose favorite band is Joy Division because I find their songs uplifting. To create something beautiful about despair or out of a feeling of despair is for me the most hopeful, life-affirming thing a person can do, because the expression of that despair is part of the struggle against it, the attempt to negate it. So she finds beauty in wrestling with these demons.
Right.
Yeah.
And she's going and her approach is to go right at them too, right? There's no dancing around them. There's no interesting.
Yeah. Well, so we're in the early part of 1999. And we've reached the obituary we knew was coming. Let me grab one from the Independent. This is from Mark Ravenhill, one of her contemporaries. I'll just read a few paragraphs of this. Sarah Kane was a contemporary writer with a classical sensibility who created a theater of great moments of beauty and cruelty, a theater to which it was only possible to respond with a sense of awe. Hers was a sensibility that Shakespeare or Sophocles or Racine would have recognized, but that was often abrasive for a modern audience and, it seems, incomprehensible to most critics. For those used to the reassurances of sociology or psychology in plays, the austere beauty of Kane's work was a shock to the system. He goes on to talk more about her work here. He really gives quite a good summary of her her work. If you're interested in a more comprehensive obit, you can read this one.
Who is this? This is
that's Mark Ravenhill.
Okay, he's like he's another playwright.
Yes, another playwright. Yeah. So this is from the New York Times. Sarah Kane, a provocative playwright whose bleak view of the limitations of human relationships and graphic dramatizations of violence and sex earned her a reputation as an enfant terrible of the British theater, died on Saturday at King's College Hospital here. She was 28. She was found hanged in her room at the hospital where she was being treated for depression, friends said. The police said they considered the case a suicide. So getting, I guess, directly into what happened and then talking about the posthumous play, which is called 448 Psychosis. Let's see here.
How is that stylized? Is it like 448 the time?
Yeah, 448 the time. And that comes from the time that she would wake up during her depression. So in the early,
she's sleeping in.
No, 4:48 a.m. Yeah. They use military time over there. No, I'm kidding. In the early hours of the 17th of February, 1999, Kane in her Brixton flat attempted suicide by taking 50 sleeping pills and over 150 antidepressant tablets. 200 pills. All right.
That should do it.
Right.
I mean, right. That's wow. That's not even cry for help level.
That's real. Yeah. Her flatmate, David Gibson, found a suicide note. I think the note was very brief. I think the note was quite literally, "I have killed myself." Wow. She was definitely did not like to mince words. Don't enter my room. I killed myself. He entered her room. She was unconscious. She was taken to King's College Hospital, resuscitated. Psychiatrists assessed her. She was intending to kill herself. She was surprised and upset she had not succeeded. She said she had no intention of killing herself while she remained at the hospital. But in abstract terms, she said that at some point she would certainly kill herself. She was detained. She was admitted to the Brunel ward. It was a general ward, not psychiatric. And her agent visited her, Mel Kenyon. She told Kenyon her suicide by overdose had been unsuccessful because she had eaten pizza, which is kind of a funny little anecdote. It's just, if only I had not eaten that pizza, I would have succeeded in meeting all of my characters. Right?
Jeez.
She recalled that when she visited Kane was extraordinary. She looked happy, healthy. She was very funny. See the pizza comment, right? You're maybe not getting the humor, but it's there. It's gallows humor. She was very funny.
Oh yeah. No, I think,
She was brimming with self-confidence. Her agent took her 200 cigarettes, which that's a good agent. That's what I want out of my agent. I want my agent to bring me cigarettes after the suicide attempt.
Yeah. Don't judge me. Just give me what I need.
Give me what I need.
Yeah, right.
and so the agent's saying, we talked about everything under the sun. They did talk about suicide. We did talk about God. We did talk about plays. We did talk about friendship. And then after I had given her the fags, I just kissed her on her forehead and said, "I love you." And she said, "I love you too." And that was the last time I saw her.
Oof.
And so she had hanged herself with her own shoelaces from the hook on the inside of the toilet door.
Jeez.
Said she probably died within 3 minutes. So we could spend a ton of time on this. Obviously, very, very mixed reactions. Her agent said, "I don't think she was depressed. It was deeper than that. I think she felt something more like existential despair, which is what makes many artists tick." Mm-hmm. Anthony Nielsen, a playwright, wrote in a letter saying, "No one in despair ticks. Truth didn't kill her. Lies did. The lies of worthlessness and futility whispered by an afflicted brain." He suggested, this writer, Nielsen, that her depression was caused by tides of chemicals that crashed through the brain. And far from enhancing her talents, these neurological storms waste time, narrow vision, and lead us here to that most tragic, most selfish action. So there's this tension here, because here you have one of the greatest living playwrights, certainly. Yeah, one of the greatest living playwrights. She's just killed herself. So it's this sort of terrible problem. A man named Paul Gordon wrote an essay called, or that said, the title was, "You don't have to be suicidal to be an artist, and it doesn't help." So you've got this problem of like, this mythology. She's nearly in the 27 club. It's just this like, and then you've got to watch out for this like awful romantic idea of the glorious suicide as an artist. And I don't, So,
how do you, I mean, that, it reminds me, we opened this with a reference to Joy Division. I mean, Ian Curtis went out in very much the same way. Yeah. Actually a little younger. The lead singer of Joy Division,
right,
had tried to kill himself, and I don't remember the details. And this isn't an Ian Curtis episode, but tried to kill himself. It hadn't worked, and ended up hanging himself. Very brief note. And similar, like a unexpected rise to sudden notoriety was part of his career as well. So,
we'll have to do an Ian Curtis episode.
We might have
like
to.
You might be on point for that, Brad. Harold Pinter, who knew Kane, which he would be the top dog at the time in terms of English playwriting, one of the, if not that. He said he was not surprised to hear the news. She talked about it a great deal. She just said it was on the cards, and I had to say, come on, for God's sake. I remember a line in her play, Crave, "Death is my lover and he wants to move in." That's quite a line, isn't it?
Whoa, yeah.
She felt man's inhumanity to man so profoundly. I believe that's what finally killed her. She couldn't stand the bloody thing anymore. Pinter spoke at Kane's memorial and is reported to have just said the following 4 words: "She was a poet." Wow. I mean, and what a thing. I mean, you're hanging out with Pinter, you're talking about suicide, like, goodness. Now, winding down here, we absolutely have to pause to just think how intense this is. She's killed herself. There's one final play, right?
Ready to go. Yeah.
Ready to go. And we're gonna stage this at the Royal Court Theater, and the play is called 448 Psychosis. She completed it shortly before she died. It premiered at the Court in 2000. It's her shortest, most fragmented work. There's no plot. There's no character. There isn't even any indication how many actors are meant to play it.
Wow.
And fellow playwright David Grieg, her friend too, he said the subject is the psychotic mind, and the time derives from where she would frequently wake up in the morning, 448 Psychosis. And it's composed of 24 sections, no specified setting, characters of stage directions, only including lengths of silence. It's dialogues, it's confessions, poetic monologues. And of course, you could see this 1,000 times, and it's going to be done 1,000 different ways.
Right. Yeah. That being that open. Yeah.
I just grabbed a random page. Here it is. "Grid yourselves, for ye shall be broken in pieces. It shall come to pass. Behold the light of despair, the glare of anguish, and ye shall be driven to darkness. If there is blasting, there shall be blasting. The names of offenders shall be shouted from the rooftops. Fear God and his wicked convocation. A skull on my skin, a seethe in my heart, a blanket of roaches on which we dance, this infernal state of siege. All this shall come to pass, all the words of my noisome breath. Remember the light and believe the light. Christ is dead and the monks are in ecstasy. We are the abjects who dispose our leaders and burn incense unto Baal. Come now, let us reason together. Sanity is found in the mountain of the Lord's house, on the horizon of the soul that eternally recedes. The head is sick, the heart's call torn. Thread the ground on which wisdom walks. Embrace beautiful lies. The chronic insanity of the sane. The wrenching begins.
Wow.
I mean, that's one single page. I mean, we're dealing with a great writer.
No, it's an amazing passage. So, have you seen interpretations of this produced at all?
I have not. I'm ashamed to say the one production of Sarah Kane's work I've seen was in London at the Soho Theatre by a company, I believe they're called Grey Eye, that uses differently abled actors, and that was of Blasted. Yeah. And the soldier was played by an actor who had no legs, and when he emerged on stage, he was jacked. His upper body was jacked, right?
Right.
And he maneuvered around stage with his arms. Wow. And the stage was built so that he could maneuver around the stage. So it was it was one of the most affecting productions I've ever seen.
Yeah. And the only reason I brought this up is I'm just curious how that particular passage would have been staged. And I could see doing it in so many, I'm not a stage director, this isn't my business, but I can just see doing that in so many different ways. And well, that's it. I mean, what a beautiful thing. I mean, just to, by the end, to be such a great writer that you've completely stripped the form bare so that you're left with what counts to you. Yeah. And she's elevated her language from fairly spare, extremely effective but fairly spare to this, and this is like almost biblical in its not that it's overtly Christian. There's something sacred about the language, or it's calling to that in some way, or it's the photo negative of calling to that or something. Yeah.
I would encourage people, if you're interested in any of this, to read the work. It's really amazing. So here's what she had to say on 448 Psychosis. I've just started to work on a new play. Awful, isn't it? Yet another play which is about the split between one's consciousness and one's physical being. For me, that's what madness is about. And the only way back to any kind of sanity is to connect physically with who you are emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. I'm writing a play called 448 Psychosis. It's got similarities with Crave, but it's different. It's about a psychotic breakdown and what happens to the person's mind when the barriers which distinguish between reality and the forms of imagination completely disappear, so that you no longer know the difference between your waking life and your dream life. Yeah. Wow. So that was what she was working on, and
she went deep.
Oh,
she went deep. Man.
Yeah. I believe she did. I believe she did say, when she handed the play in, she left a note saying, this killed me. Writing this killed me.
Right.
So I'm really I'm going to leave us here as we go with the adjustment in reception by the critical establishment, as evidenced by Blasted, the way that they responded to Blasted later. So the initial performance was highly controversial. The play was fiercely attacked by most newspaper critics, many of whom regarded it as an attempt to shock the audience. However, critics have subsequently reassessed it. For example, Michael Billington, who savaged the play in his first review, later recanted in the wake of her suicide. He said, "I got it wrong, as I keep saying. She was a major talent. Apparently, Harold Pinter said at her memorial service that she was a poet, and I think that's dead right." After seeing a revival of the play, an Evening Standard reviewer, Annie Ferguson, wrote, "How shrill and silly the 1995 hullabaloo and hysteria seemed last night when Blasted returned to the royal court. It is and always was a play with a fine moral purpose." And the Independent listed it as one of the 40 best plays ever. Wow. And I'm just gonna leave us with a little more from her. And this is something I feel very strongly about as well. The need for theater. She said, I am convinced that the theater is part of the most fundamental of human needs. I believe that if a city is destroyed by a bomb, the people, first of all, look for food and shelter. And having provided these necessities, they start to tell their stories.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it. One more para. For me, the function of the theater is to allow experimentation through art in a way that we are not able to experiment effectively in real life. If we experiment in the theater such as an act of extreme violence, then maybe we can repulse it as such to prevent the act of extreme violence out on the street. I believe that people can change and that it is possible for us as a species to change our future. It's for this that I write what I write. Woo!
Yeah.
Whoa, doggy. All right. That is the unspeakable Sarah Kane, who put her stamp on the English theater, and for whom the Germans, because she was adored in Germany. Let's see exactly what did they do. In response to her death, there was a minute's silence held on the radio in Germany, and the theaters in the country dimmed their lights as a mark of respect. She had, I read somewhere years ago, she had something like 12 different productions happening all at once. 10 in Germany, a couple in England. You're happy as a playwright now to have a production anywhere going on at any given time.
Right.
So
right. Wow.
She had it all, and then she just couldn't take her own mind, and so there we go.
Yeah.
All right. So we do have a little more coming on the Patreon episode. It's patreon.com/artofdarkpod. You can find us on the Bird website, Twitter @artofdarkpod. Brad's managing that. We have fun with it. Hope you enjoy this. We put a lot of effort into the episodes and a lot of soul. I'm really excited. My next episode is going to be with the great Blauergeist. We're going to talk about Walt Disney. But before that, who do you have coming up?
We went from dark to darker.
Yeah, the only thing darker than Sarah Kane is Walt Disney. Truly, because you've got pure evil. Sarah Kane was wrestling with evil. Disney,
right. Sarah Kane had a pure heart, but was dealing with demons. Where it was Walt Disney might have
summoned them. He made pals with them.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Who are you doing next, Brad?
I am. We're going to have a pretty quick turnaround here. Actually, I am doing Zora Neale Hurston, the great novelist of the Harlem Renaissance and folklorist and anthropologist and just all around and voodoo priestess, as we'll learn. So this should be a good one, man.
All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, Brad. I got to ask you the final Art of Darkness question. What do you think Sarah Kane is doing today if she were still around?
Well, yeah, this is one of the most interesting ones to ask this question about, because she died so young, and she was so close to our own cultural. I think she's maybe the closest to our cultural context. We've had people who died after her. Johnny Cash died in the 2000s, but he was an old man, right?
Yeah.
And so he was. You could feel he was from a previous era, whereas that Sarah Kane was just a few years older than my brother, for crying out loud. So you can kind of see it, but it's also interesting because, like I said, like by the time she gets to 448 Psychosis, she's like rended the form so much apart. Like I don't even know it was like, what did she have left? It's like if you destroy all of the foundations, then what are you standing on anymore? So. Yeah, I'm sure she would have continued to create because she seems she's possessed by that spirit. She's not going to just turn away from it. But I would be fascinated to see it almost seems like they would become art installations / performance art type pieces. And I don't mean that to dismiss it, because a lot of that stuff can be kind of cringy, but like it almost seems like she would just continue turning that crank. I don't know. What do you think?
I like to believe that she would still be writing for the theater. I think that she was interrogating it and wrestling with it. And I just think she lost her battle with whatever she was up against in there. And I think that she possibly would have continued to write. She had such clearly a command of it. And I think she'd be writing for sure. Yeah. And possibly directing.
Right. But that seems like she might have gone deeper into that territory. I'm so impressed by anybody who can master, like I said before, there's a lot of musicians who seem to have mastered their craft in their 20s, but it's pretty rare for a writer. There's a handful.
Oh yeah. Without a doubt.
So I'm really impressed by that.
Well, she had such a lyrical sensibility, right? And she had that poetic sense, which I think hopefully I communicated. So, Brad, thank you so much for being a partner in this. I really enjoyed these, man. This was a lot of fun. I hope people listening enjoy.
Oh yeah, it was great. You did a great job. And
fun.
This is like one of the few. This is one of the few that, like, as a person, I barely knew at all. So that that was kind of exhilarating for me. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Well, definitely pick up one of the plays. I mean, they're a quick read, and I think you get an awful lot out of it in the theater of the mind. We're going to do another 20 or 30 minutes on the After Dark episode, which is for Patreon subscribers. You can find us at Art of Dark Pod on the Bird website, and then artofdarkpod.com. All right. We'll talk to you soon. Okay, Brad, try not to, on the way out, Let's see. Is the vulture going to descend? Where I'm in the floorboards. I've just eaten a baby, and
I'm going to try not. I'm going to try not to eat a baby on my way out of the room. Yeah,
it's just coming down on your head, Brad. All right, I'll talk to you in a minute.
Yep, sure.